in this Congress, so I'm also not a chairperson. I'm just, as you, one of the audience person, but I'm just trying to facilitate this lecture by introducing Professor R.C. Tripathi. Professor R.C. Tripathi is a very distinguished academics from India. His doctoral degree he received at Michigan in those days when Michigan was in its top form. Still it is in top form, but that was the time period of Michigan that many eminent people were there as faculty. His academic home has been Allahabad, University of Allahabad in India, which has been a center of advanced study in psychology. He has taught there nearly 5 decades. He does not look that old, but he has been in academics for more than 5 decades. I request Professor Tripathi to give this address and also manage his time as there is no chairperson. Please come. You can come ahead, closer if you wish.
That is if you don't want to leave in the middle. Thank you very much, Prof. Janak Pandey. It's very appropriate that I should be introduced by you for 2 reasons. One, you are the president of the division which nominated me for this State of the Art lecture. I'm honored. Also want to thank the ICAP for inviting me to deliver this lecture. State of the Art lectures, or maybe whatever you want to call it. It's a bit of a euphemism because I don't think that many of us really are familiar with what the state of the art is. Nobody can possibly really expect to be really familiar with everything which is there in this field. What I'll try to do is to share with you what I have done, what I know about I first thought that maybe what I'll do is just sort of share some of the PPTs and also maybe read out from what I'm supposed to deliver to these people here at ICAP as a chapter which will probably come out of one of the handbooks. But then I think it's a very friendly audience, so I think I like to dialogue more than lecture. Let's begin with this. We're talking about othering, and thank you for being here. Thank you for the encouragement, and I'm glad that we are friends. I hope that that sort of stays beyond these 1.5 hours which we're going to spend together. What I want to do is to just talk a little bit about what I mean by unothering and othering and so on. I'll talk about how construction of other really comes about. And I'll also talk about the different types of others which one can conceptualize or are there. I'll talk about the process of othering a little bit and certain mechanisms. There are theories, I think, which are there, with which all of you are familiar with, particularly relating to intergroup conflicts and their resolutions. And some of you, I think, probably are working in the area of peace. And if you're working in the area of peace, then I think there are theories related to reconciliation and the theories related to forgiveness and so on. I'll try to draw something out of those theories. I'll also try to then talk about what I mean by creating shared cultural spaces. And this is basically based on something, which we've been trying to do in India. Trying to privilege culture to resolve conflicts. Culture, I think, as you probably know, can cut both ways. It can be used to create conflicts. My contention is that culture can also be used for harmony and for establishing peace. There's something which I think we know. For example, if you think in terms of human evolution, if you have read about what evolutionary psychologists talk about, we trained to think in categorical terms. Human mind thinks in dualistic terms. It categorizes. And when I'm talking about that it categorizes, what I have in mind is that it can categorize in so many different ways. But one of the ways in which it categorizes, and when talking about dualistic category, it categorizes in terms of good and evil. And you take any religious group, you take any ethnic group, you'll find that those kinds of categories will be present there. In almost all religions of the world, the God is represented as the ultimate goodness. And God is juxtaposed with the devil, who personifies evil. If you dig into Christianity, then you'll find that there's something like a Satan in Christianity. In Islam, you have Shaitan or Iblis. Those are two terms which you will come across. In Zoroastrianism, you have Ahriman. In Buddhism, you have Mara. And in Hinduism, my own religion, you have Daityas and Asuras. Now, these categories may be kind of mythical categories. But what we need to realize is that they're no longer mythical because they have taken on some kind of a social reality, and actually I would say there's not only social reality, also cultural reality which has happened. The reason I say that is that these terms will get used in almost every language on a day-to-day basis. And there will be somebody or the other who will be, given this epithet of, let's say, Rakshas in India, which is supposed to be something for a devil. And of course, devil in English is something which you will be using very, 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 very often. So one such category which I'm talking about is it's good and evil. The other point which I want to make is that the other is not present. It's not real in the sense that it's present somewhere. It's a mind product. It's something which we construct. And your construction may be different from my construction. It's not necessary that what you construct as the other will necessarily be my other also. And when you talk about other, there's something which I think is very clear. That other would be something which would not be like me, as not something which would not like me. It would be something which self does not want to be ever. So there's a boundary between self and other. This whole discourse which I'm talking about, the discourse of othering or the discourse related to the other. Those of you who've been sort of working with in the area of feminism probably would be very familiar with this. I think Polly would be very familiar with this because she works in the area of human rights. But other is something which is at the center of all conflicts. Be they ethno conflicts, be they religious conflicts, be they national conflicts. But in all of these conflicts, central to it, central to the process, is the process of otherness or creation of what we call the other. How does other come to be constructed? Easy to understand this. When you're talking about self and other, there has to be a process of differentiation which has to be present. And we know that Tajfeld's work has shown that social identities, they grow out of the processes of differentiation. There's another process which is involved here, which is the process of categorization. There are two processes. You categorize, I talked about categorization. In categorization, there is also a process of sort of discovering commonalities, similarities, and so on. But you'll recall the minimum paradigm studies, then you'll recall that the Mill-Mungo paradigm studies were all based on differentiation. There are two processes which are involved, differentiation. One is what is called the process of inscription, which is that there are certain attributes which you will be ascribing to your own group. These are characteristics, of my group, my people, or whatever. And there'll be another process, the process of ascription, which is, externally oriented. And that process is that you're really talking about the other group people. So there's this interplay between these two processes, the inscription and the ascription processes, which is responsible for social identities. There's an interesting process here which I think we haven't really looked at. That how is it that those who ascribe certain characteristics to me, not how I sort of achieve my own positive group distinctiveness, what do those ascriptions do to my identity? So India, for example, when you're talking about, for example, when we talk about Islam these days, what does it really do when we really talk about, what Trump talks about Muslims? Or somebody else, some group of people, or let's say the Israelis talk about the Palestinians. What implication does it have? But that's something which I think I'll probably be talking about later. Now, the processes of inscription and ascription, they result in biases, intergroup biases. We have in-group biases. As I said, that one of the biases is that you think that your group is the best. The intergroup attitude which you have, the in-group attitudes are always positive. The out-group attitudes are generally negative. It's not necessary that they should all be negative, but generally, it goes without saying that the in-group attitudes will generally be positive. Except I think we need to find out that in certain cases there are things which when I talk about different types of othering, then I'll talk about that there can be a situation where a group can other itself also. Now these kinds of biases result in ethnocentrism. It's a term, very, very old term, somebody used it. There's another term which I think has come to be used, which is called collective narcissism, which is that you start loving your group so much that becomes the basis for hating other groups. But one of the things which happens, I think, in the construction of learning is it's not only the bias. And I think when you're talking about biases, I think probably you'll assume this is something which Bowling has talked about. All these biases which we're discussing, or the attitudes which we have toward other people, other groups, there are certain cognitive structures, there are certain affective structures, there are certain evaluative structures. All these structures go into the construction of the other. And when talking about the biases, generally the studies which we have found is that, well, I think people would be talking about the cognitive biases. If you're familiar with the work of Kahneman, you have in another context, then you'll find that yes, cognitive biases are present. But there are other kinds of biases which I think happen, which I think we have to look at. You know, for example, there are positive biases, or it's positivity bias, positivity in-group bias. Which we have to look at. The distinction between groups, or the distinction between the other and the self, is based on boundaries which are created. And the boundaries could be, you know, boundaries which can be crossed, which cannot be crossed. There are permeable boundaries, there are not permeable boundaries. But the permeability differs based on values, based on norms, based on many other things. And therefore, what we're talking about is that the group boundaries may be real or symbolic boundaries. For example, it's possible that you may not be able to, I mean, it's now becoming possible, but there was a time when it was not possible. The gender boundaries could not be crossed. The science has made that possible, that the gender boundaries can probably be crossed, but there was a time that it could not be done. But the racial boundaries, again, I think it's extremely difficult that you can change your genetic structure and then decide, well, no, I'm no longer this, I'm this now. Then there are boundaries which are symbolic boundaries. And the symbolic boundaries are boundaries that we create, we construct, and those boundaries are constructed in a number of manners. Another point which I want to make is that when we're talking about the other is different from self, but it also is another self. Just imagine if there were no self, or I'm sorry, if there were no other, what kind of a self would you have? Or will there be a possibility of a self? Now, there's an interesting statement which I think I need to point out to. That other is necessary, and this is a statement made by Bendesa and Atias. Other is necessary because it's another self, a mirror and a foil. It's both. And it's in that sense, I think, you will now understand that construction, when you talk about construction of the other, that other is different from self, but other is also another self. What's the process of othering? Now, when we talk about the process of othering, now, we said that it will involve differentiation. But it's not only differentiation. The idea is that it's a process in which the differences will be turned into otherness. Understand that we're not the same, but it's using the differences and turning them into otherness is what the process of othering is about. What would that involve? Othering would involve that there would be social distancing. Othering would involve that there would be characteristics that are not attributed to self, it's only attributed to the other. And the reason for that is, if it's like self, if it's another self, then it's a defiled self. The reason for that is that we're talking about now not only a process which involves cognitive differentiation. There's another kind of differentiation which is coming in. There's another structure which is coming in, it's the affective structure. If you have read the work of Sternberg on the nature of hate, also his wife, Sternberg and Sternberg. Sternberg has a theory, it's called the triangular theory of love, but there's also a triangular theory of hate. And he talks about 3 dimensions there. The 3 dimensions which he talks about is that the first thing which happens when you love somebody or when you hate somebody, the first in the triangle, the one of the coordinate which you have is intimacy. In love, the distance is reduced. In hate, it's the opposite. You negate intimacy, and when you negate intimacy, what happens? It adds to the distance. Negation of intimacy means social distanciation. You sort of pushing this person away. The second component of it is what you call passion. And in passion you have anger, you may have fear, and it's based on that you're trying to avoid the person. Because you're angry, you don't want to relate with this person. You want to avoid this person. And the third one is commitment. Still staying on hate. You committed to devalue the worth of that person. In love, it's going to be the opposite, but in hate, it's going to be different. you run this person down. When I'm talking about the defiled self, that's what is going to happen. The defiled self happens because there is a commitment to run down a person, run down a group of persons. And the process of othering involves that. Another point which I like to make here is that othering is different from animification. In animification, yeah, you have an enemy. The only reason that person is an enemy is not because you defiling, he has a defiled self. The enemy may have all the good characteristics, but there's no possibility of coming together with that enemy. And there are people, who respect their enemies also. And again, in evilification, there is no possibility. Just again, this evil person is only derogated. And there's no possibility of attaining any kind of a positive distinctiveness with a person who's really evil. That possibility is just sort of negated there. Another thing which happens in the process of othering is that the process involves objectification. You see this other person as an object. In the Sturm's model also, when we're talking about devaluing somebody or running down or the commitment, the idea was that you turn that person into an animal, or an animal-like person, or animal-like, having those kinds of characteristics. And that's what happens in case of process of othering also here. The person is objectified, is dehumanized, those kinds of characteristics which are there in any human being. It's not given the kind of respect which is required. There's no possibility of empathizing with this person. Forget about compassion. That, again, possibility is not there when this person is dehumanized. Let me sort of quickly, I want to leave some time for discussion. So I'll quickly go through whatever I have here. Different types of others we can talk about. There's a type of other where Leca talks about the little other versus the big other. Like when Leca talks about little other, he's basically talking about something. Is talking about the projection of his own ego or people's ego. Big other is different because in case of the big other, what we're doing basically here is we're dealing with symbolic persons. We're not really dealing with the real persons. You'll be familiar with this distinction which Edward Said had called the exotic other versus the familiar other. The Orientals in his time used to be the exotic other. They were strange, they had all kinds of qualities. The exotic attracted you. The familiar other were, of course, the Europeans were the familiar others. There's a primary other and there's a secondary other. The primary other, for example, for the Arabs, the primary other happens to be Israel. The secondary other happens to be the United States. So if you're associating with your enemy's enemy, your enemy's friend is your enemy. Also internal other versus external other is again something which has not been given very much attention to. Do you realize that how many internal others are there in Islam? There are very, very few people who realize that. Why would Iran and Iraq would be fighting? Why would the Shias and the Sunnis be fighting? Why would the Kurds be fighting the Turks? There are so many, internal others, which almost all societies and cultures have. Then, of course, when we come down to it, then you'll find that even within culture like India or the Hinduism, you have certain group of people who are not integrated. They're untouchables. State versus the non-state other. I think almost all, I think if you're from Latin America, you'll understand how Che and his guerrillas viewed the state. If you're from India, you will understand how Naxalites view the state. Or for that matter, if you're from India, you will see, or if you're from Pakistan, or you're from Afghanistan, you'll see how Talibans look at the state. These are the different mechanisms, I think, which we can think about. There are othering through oppression. I talked about slavery yesterday. The different kinds of slaveries. If you think in terms of colonization, then you'll think about othering through oppression. If you think about dictatorship, you'll think about oppression. That's one possibility. You'll see people who are simply not civil. For the British, the Indians and the tribes in India were not civil, they needed to be civilized in various ways. And that happened through oppression, of course. I think all colonizers have done that. Then there's this other kind of, Charlotte talks about another kind of othering, which is othering through generation of virtuous. Purity is a norm which I think almost all cultures use. There are pure people and there are impure people. You can other on the basis of moral considerations, whatever those moral considerations are, but morality becomes a factor through which others can come to be great. The third kind of othering, which is defensive othering, is that when you really, really start believing that your oppressor is right, that you really don't deserve the kind of respect which you're demanding because you don't have those qualities. You're not modern, you're not civil. Something which happens all the time, I think we were talking about with Ipa yesterday and Pandey. The group of people who are being put to certain kinds of schools because they belong to a certain tribe. So if you want to do that, if you want to civilize them, if you want to do that, then that's the kind of thing. And if you really start believing that, that's the defensive kind of othering which we will have. Let me just sort of quickly go through some of these things because it's Pandey, this thing goes on. My president has gone off to sleep. Right?
1:45.
1:45. I'll try to. Yeah, I have another. Can I take another 10 minutes, maybe? Yeah. Let me take another 10 minutes so you're left with it. Okay. One of the things which I think I want to make very clear. The conditions and the factors which create othering, the absence of those conditions and factors does not create an othering. Okay, I want to repeat that. It's the same thing which happens in case of conflict and peace. Very often what happens is that you say you take away, you control, you mitigate those factors, which create and generate conflict. But the peace does not happen. I think a lot of theories which we have, the intergroup relations theories in which we have tried to control or resolve conflicts have not resulted in peace and harmony. These conditions are very different. Unothering and othering, these are processes which are sort of different processes, and the absence of one does not necessarily result in the presence of the other condition. Now, the process of unothering is different, because what you're basically doing is that you're trying to make the other agreeable, you're trying to make the other person likable, you're trying to make the other person sympathetic, not through design. And I think that's something which I like to underscore. Not through design, but through enfoldment. And this is a concept which I am borrowing from the feminists. The feminists sort of enfold. Okay? They wrap you around. Rather than, where they're talking about basically that you become just like me. It's about relationship. It's about the depth of relationship. How do you relate? It's about the nature of relationship, which is very, very important. The second thing which I like to make is that unothering involves transformation of self such that the other becomes part of it. It's not, just that self and other, have a negative relationship. But if other becomes part of self, it gets included in self. That's what transformation is about. And of course, it involves change in cognitive, affective, and evaluative structures that support it. And the last point which I just made was, unothering is not the absence of othering, just as I think Galton, you'll recall, that Galton also makes a difference between what he calls negative peace and positive peace. Positive peace is something which lasts over a period of time. Negative peace is just there for a while, till, conditions change, and again you have another kind of a conflict taking place. Unothering is not patronizing sentimentalism, which happens very often. It happened in Gujarat, Wali, where a lot of NGOs surfaced. The government came in, say, okay, your house got burned down, we're going to come and give you money for building it. Or there were these people, present there and saying that, showing their sympathies. So that patronizing sentimentalism is not really what is going to work. It draws from values, it draws from norms, it draws from practices of culture to build trust and mutuality. Events and activities that bring about collective effervescence is what really, when happens, will create unothering. Now look at this. This is something which I just got this morning, and thanks to, this is something from a restaurant called Eat On in Allahabad. That's the city where I live. They have organized an iftar party. I don't know, you familiar with iftar party? You familiar with this holy month which the Muslims have called the Ramadan? It's during this period that they fast throughout the day, and the evening they break their fast, and when they break their fast, it's called iftar. And there's a certain kind of food which is served in the evening, during Ramadan. What's happening here is, and I don't know whether you can see this, the people sitting, with caps, the Muslims, And right in front of this, there is a person who looks more like a sadhu or a Hindu priest. Now, when you have, celebrations, this is celebration. This is, what are you celebrating? You're celebrating jointly with your other his festival. Joining in a festival, resulting in collective effervescence. This is a term which I think, a sociologist uses. Blame me on my age now. The communities, they come in, and this is when this happens. I think I'll not give a lot of credence to this. Is a great example of what real India is. So forget that. Just focus on the first part. Okay. There are other things which are happening in India. But this is not the only thing which is happening in India. So anyway, when I'm talking about collective effervescence, it is coming in and joining in cultural festivals and practices. Creation of shared cultural spaces is possible. For example, in Canada, one of the things which is happening is the psychology of acculturation and the policy of multiculturalism, where you have these two dimensions. You have the people who want to maintain their heritage culture, and those people also want to sort of come and sort of maintain contact with other cultures. John Barry's model, where he talks about integration. That's something where you find that you want to maintain your culture, but at the same time you want to sort of make contact with other cultural groups also. That multiculturalism is something where you find that cultural spaces are getting shared. In India, we have what we call composite culture. The composite culture is where we talk about thousands years of cultures in which we have lived together, particularly the Hindus and the Muslims. The reason being that these Muslims were, once upon a time, they used to be Hindus. And there's some interesting things which have happened. There is a song, again, creation of culture, There's a song which is sung in a place where I live, Shruti lives and others live, which is sung at the time when a child is born. It's called Soha. The song which is sung is very, very different. What is it? What does it say? The Muslim mother sings that song, which is actually sacrilegious, says, "I bless Allah for bringing Lord Krishna into my home." Now it's unthinkable. Lord Krishna is a Hindu god. And the song which is being sung is blessing Allah because Lord Krishna has been blessed. Now you'll find in language, you'll find in songs, you'll find in theater, you'll find in many, many other places where this kind of a composite culture has actually emerged in India. Now if you privilege this kind of a culture, othering can come about. If you keep on harping on the differences which are there, if you're forgetting the similarities which are there, if you're not creating cultural spaces together like what we're talking about, then that's not going to happen. I can keep going on and on. There is, Professor Pandey talked about the Gandhian approach of inclusion. Some of that got used in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa also. But in all of these approaches which we talk about, you'll find that reconciliation does not happen because you're talking about something where, again, you're drawing, basically what you're doing is that you're drawing, it succeeds because you're drawing from culture. Forgiveness is something which is integral to Christianity. Because of the tragedy, because you draw from the culture and then use it. Gandhian approach also worked precisely for that reason in India, because he drew a lot of motives, a lot of values, a lot of other things from the Hindu culture to bridge the divide between the Hindus and Muslims. If he can do this, can go. What I have done is, let me quickly, very, very quickly talk about a study which we've been involved in. Some of you will be interested in this. We have 4 groups. We've taken a control group. We have taken a group of people who attend a fair which is a Hindu fair and also a Muslim fair, a Sufi fair, a pure Sufi fair and a less Sufi fair. And then we have taken a group of people who go to a pure Hindu fair. And what you find here is, just look at this. You'll find that there is a peak here where you find that the self-other differentiation on negative attitudes. Self is attributed more negative attributes compared to the other. There is this positive differentiation which takes place again. I think you have to look at this again. Self is attributed less positive characteristics compared to the other. There is a dip which you find. This is for people who are attending a bazaar of what is called Ghazi Mia. It's a Sufi religious place where they go. But in Kumbh Mela, that is the Hindu Mela, the Hindu fair, suddenly you find that the positive differentiation comes down. You find that outlook respect again goes up in case where there are basically going to a fair which is a fair where both Hindus and Muslims go. Quickly, mere absence of conditions and factors that create othering do not bring about unothering. They're at best, they can be preconditioned, but that does not happen. State interventions have had little success in establishing positive peace. Most larger scale peace efforts have not made use of psychological studies. Just as psychological theories have kept away learning from such efforts that have been made on the ground. Finally, there is an urgent need for scientists and peace activists to seek convergence in their efforts. Thank you very much. Are there any questions, comments? I look for comments. I don't have answers.
Excellent presentation. I'm sure Professor Tripathi will be happy if you comment or have any queries or questions.
Yes, sir.
This shared cover space, is it created from above by authority figures?
No. It's from the ground.
From the ground.
Yeah,
So then, who are these people that create it? What kind of people? What makes
it has happened, it has happened over centuries. It's not something which is created. That's why I said that it's not by design. It's been happening, they're there. You're already there. You see, the case with India is that, Hindus and Muslims, they have been living together for centuries. And it was, after the Mughals came and the others came, a lot of them, the whole village converted into Islam and so on. But, they may have converted, but, what has happened is that they have retained their culture. What has happened actually is they have retained their culture, but then there is also political ideologies. What happens is that when you start sort of privileging political ideology, then the other comes to be great. Is that kind of another which is based on ideology.
So does that mean that authority figures are powerless to encourage this?
Yes. The so-called electoral democracy which we have. If you really want to win somebody's favor, you start doing that. I mean, that happens all the time everywhere, all over the world. Excellent question, yeah. Any more questions, comments? You want to add to the... Yeah, sorry.
Thank you so much. I'm thinking a little bit further because this morning I read on Twitter some comments of people very, very angry because a Dutch politician said that maybe Trump's proposal to put some US officers at Schiphol Airport to...
Could you use the microphone, please?
See it? I mean, stand up. Sorry.
That this morning, so I lost track. I start over. I'm wondering about the emotions coming from this unothering process. That all the hate tweets on Twitter, I just related this to hate to a Dutch politician who objected to US measures to put some officials at Schiphol Airport to prevent people from Muslim countries taking a flight. So full of hatred, the emotions are coming from the fact I was wondering, this person is feeling unothered. I don't know, it's just a quite...
Is he unothered or othered?
Othered, yes, I'm sorry. Yeah. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I think this is again something which we will really need to understand. What's really happening in social media, in what's happening, for example, the comments which we get to read on Twitter, the WhatsApp and the message which gets shared, and you have on Facebook and, all over the place. It's unclear to me, how to really understand them. There's something which happens on a face-to-face basis. There's something which happens, Is it something where we're really talking about, projection of egos? Is that what it is? Or it's more than that? How seriously do we? But what really happens is that they do really go into the construction. Gauguin, I think, probably would be happy doing some of this kind of a work. How does this social construction take place? I think a lot of that social construction is today taking place on social media. How stable they are, I don't know. I mean, that was something which was sort of spur of the moment kind of a thing, and tomorrow, when something else happens, there is a neighbor who comes in with a simai, during Eid, whether the person will welcome him to his home or will not welcome him to his home, I really don't know. But I think a very significant point that is being made is that there is this new world, the cyber world, which is getting created. What kind of implication does it have for intergroup relations and peace? Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I disagree with you.
Okay.
I think that a person like you, when I hear you speak, you're just so respectful of people who are unlike you. And I hear the way you speak about people who are othering, and you speak about them in respectful ways. And I think that modeling will have huge influence. And so maybe authority figures can't go and create rules, but they can set models to do that. Like you. I think that's part of it.
Thank you. Okay.
Sir,
is it a power play? saying othering.
It is. Yes, of
I
course.
feel myself powerful, that's why I think the others are they are powerless in some attributes. Or the other group will say that they are the others, they are inferior in certain attributes.
Yes.
So is it in
It is a symmetrical relationship always when you other, but also understand that it's a reciprocal relationship. It's a reciprocal relationship, but what stays, what makes the other, what constructs the other is it's the powerful who construct other. I may want to do it, but that's not going to happen, you know.
Interesting.
Well, let's thank Professor Tripathi. Thank you. Nice presentation. And thank you for coming. Still you can chat with him.